Hello, good morning, and welcome to this Dawn Busters Taste Challenge, if one should call what I'm looking at dawn. Looks like nighttime to me, but we are in pretend time. The clock says 5:35 a.m. Central Time, but we know in reality it's 4:35 a.m. Central Time. But we'll play along with another one of those government uh, altered realities. Here is Old Overholt. Hit my elbow. Old, that hurt. Old Overholt. Founded in Pennsylvania in 1810 by Abraham Overholt. Registered in the United States Patent Office, it says. Yes, and if you check the trademark data, it does show that the trademark for this was acquired in 1810. So it's not one of these things where they try to make it seem like it's really old when it's not. You know, like Evan Williams since 1783, but then you find out that the Evan Williams whiskeys didn't hit the market till 1955, and you're like, wait a minute, that's a lot long. That's a lot. That's a lot of years after 1783, or like, well, Jim Beam. Yes, there is a history for Beam Distilling going back to 1795, but the Jim Beam bourbon did not hit the market till 1938. But anyway, this is Old Overholt straight rye whiskey. Straight rye whiskey, bottled in Kentucky, which, if it's straight rye, means all the whiskeys have to come from Kentucky. And it says right there, distilled in Kentucky. So it's a Kentucky whiskey. Because what happened was Old Overholt got bought out, and they just basically abandoned the distillery. And I saw a YouTube video where people were wandering around the old distillery, which is so dilapidated and dangerous. I thought, they're trespassing, but which is bad enough. But then I was thinking, why would the owner just abandon the distillery? That seems like us will put them in a liability, but it's way out in the woods. Basically, they got trees growing up all around it. But anyway, all right. So now it's just a brand. It's no longer a company. It's just they bought the brands, the trademarks, bought the recipe, and moved everything. And all the people that worked there in Pennsylvania lost their jobs, and unless they moved to Kentucky and continued on in Beam. I think it was like in the early 90s, early to mid 90s, it got closed, like 93. I think. I couldn't really get good information on it, but I believe that's correct. Herbie says, sir to you in India. All right. Kevin Johnston says, if Old Overhaul doesn't win, I will be quite suspicious. Suspicious? What? That I'm cheating? Okay. Brown bottle, which protects it from the light. So that's a good thing. Glass, good thing. Twist cap. Well, that depends on who you're talking to. This is the black cap. This particular version of Old Overhaul was discontinued in 2020 and replaced by another version of Old Overhaul with a red cap. Okay, my friend David tracked this one down at Elio's Wine Warehouse. It was the last bottle they had of the old black cap, and it was $17.99. All right, so you won't see it anymore because this hasn't been made for 4 years. Here is, well, you might find one lingering somewhere. Here's Templeton Rye, introduced in 2005. Nice embossed clear glass. Clear glass isn't really as good, but whiskey doesn't spoil as easily as beer does under light damage. Beer can get damaged very quickly under light, and then it'll smell like an old skunk got run over by a car. It's kind of a bad aroma there. That's why beer is better in a brown bottle, or at least green. Green sort of protects it from the light. This is aged 4 years, their standard version. Oh, and Schlitz was the company that pioneered brown beer bottles in 1912. Okay, wooden cap, rubber stopper. Yes, it's true. Templeton is in Iowa. It's a little village in Iowa, and there's a distillery there. But this is not made at Templeton. It's bottled there. This is Indiana whiskey. It's shipped to Templeton where it's bottled. All right. Makes no difference to me, but that's what the story is on it. And it's 80 proof as well as the Old Overholt is. This is age 4 years. Old Overholt's age only 3 years. 3 years, 4 years. And Templeton is not listed as straight rye. It's just listed as rye whiskey, which means, yes, it does have to be aged in new charred oak barrels, not for four whole years, but they chose to go with 4 years, quite a bit longer than it required for straight rye. So why isn't it not called straight rye? Because more than likely they're using flavoring in it, which is allowed, and they don't have to tell you that they're using flavoring. If you read your regulations, which I know you say, I don't want to sit here and read a bunch of government regulations. That has to be about the most boring thing in the world, reading government documents. I agree with that it could be a boring thing, but I like to do it. Oh crap, I poured too much of the Templeton. Well, I don't really want to pour more. It should. It doesn't feel like the weight is much different. They're both amber, gold, kind of honey colored, I guess. Now, look, I don't know if this would be a suspicious thing if they tied or if Old Overhaul doesn't win, because think about it, they're both probably chill. Well, we know this is chill filtered. That one probably is, since it's not saying it isn't. 3-year age, 4-year age, 3 years, 4 years, not a big difference. 80 proof, 80 proof. Straight rye whiskey, fine. It's not listed as straight, might have flavoring, but the flavoring might be such that it makes it taste the same as an Old Overhaul. We just don't know. What have I noticed about Templeton in these taste challenges so far? Well, the Old Overhaul, we just don't know. What have I noticed about Templeton in these taste challenges so far? Well, I noticed that it's kind of bland relative to the other ones. When I tasted it on its own in isolation, it had a lot of flavor, and I liked the flavor and everything. Fine, in isolation. When I brought it into challenges, that's when it began to stumble and trip, stumble, and fall. Yeah, that's what happened with it. Price point, they got this one at Total Wine and More for $18.99. I paid $17.99 for it, remember? And this one is running about $32 to $34. Although I did find one store that had it for $29.99, some obscure liquor store with a website. But yeah, so you're probably looking at about, let's just say $32. 32 versus 20. If they tie, then Templeton loses by default because it's $12 more. If it costs $12 more, it should be $12 better, right? I have a serious doubt that it'll be 12 cents better. It's not that much of a difference there on the pour. I was a little concerned about it, so I had to look. Let's go to a screen share for a moment, and you can get an idea what the website is. Here's Old Overhaul. They don't have their own website, but they have a website called James B. Beam Distilling Company. It shows lots of whiskeys that company makes in Kentucky, owned by, it's owned by Beam Suntory. The Japanese multi sort of like multiplicity company, because Suntory makes a lot of beer. Suntory beer in Japan, which I've never seen in the United States. They make all kind of whiskey, Japanese whiskey, obviously, some of which we can get, a lot of which we can't get, which is irritating. But I have tried their Hibiki Harmony, which I loved, and the Suntory Thai. Some people pronounce it Toki. I don't really know how it's pronounced, but I say Thai. It sounds more Japanese. It sounds like that's how they would pronounce it, Tokai. Now, and I thought it was a perfect match by Jim Beam Company, because they make American whiskey, and then here they'll be a Japanese whiskey company, and then they can buy all these subsidiaries like Glenglassaugh Scotch Whiskey Company, and then yeah, so it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. So it's showing here you have the oldest of all Beam family whiskeys, established in 1810 by the upright, forward-thinking Abraham. Oh yeah, okay. They vowed to continue doing it the right way. They say, well, I think they do it the right way. Of course, I can't say that for sure because I never had before the buyout. So I'd have to find an old unopened bottle from the 1970s. No. Now they're showing 86 proof, non-chill filtered. Wait a minute. My bottle says 80 proof. That's right, because I told you earlier, I have the older bottle. There's a distillery, but it's not a distillery. That's gone. And here's some other brands they make. Old Crow, that was bought by Jim Beam years ago. Knob Creek, that's like an above premium whiskey that was started by Jim Beam Company. And then Basil Hayden, they wanted to make more of a gourmet line, much more specialty bourbons. Back in the early 90s, they got this idea. They wanted to expand and put out a lot more specialty brands because they felt like bourbon could diversify, you know what I'm saying? Like maybe become more of a connoisseur product than it was when it was considered just a cheap mixer product. It wasn't too well regarded. And then so they kind of helped create bourbon culture today with all these specialty brands that they invented. I guess you don't invent a brand, you develop a brand, right? Yeah. Of course, their mainline Jim Beam, we all know that good product. Knob Creek, Basil Hayden, Little Book, Bakers, Bookers. These are named after different people in the family and distillery masters. Legent, I think another family member of the family. Old Tub, I never got to try that one, but I heard it's good. Of course, Old Crow, that was a buyout. Hardin's Creek, I think that's a new one that they had come up with recently. Old Granddad, another one of those buyouts. They bought it from some other company and put it under their umbrella. And Claremont Steep, this is something brand new from, I think, this year. It's this new thing now, American single malt whiskey. They're trying to mimic Scotch single malt, all barley malt. Is that any good? Couldn't take because I never had it, but I would assume it is. So there's your lineup. And obviously it's much more expensive than what they're showing there because you wouldn't be able to fit it on the screen if they showed if they showed everything. Templeton 4-year charred American oak. Yes, all rye whiskey has to be aged in new charred American oak. So that's not really it's not a meaningful statement because by its nature, by what it is, it has to be new charred oak. It's like when you buy a bourbon and they're touting on the label, aged in new charred oak barrels. Well, duh, yeah, it's bourbon. It has to be. Or, if they said made with corn, predominantly corn. Well, yeah, it has to be predominantly corn to be bourbon. Just like this has to be predominantly rye. There's the rye malting in the background. The sprouting rye. Okay, so You can look at all their whiskey. It's won many awards, though, gotta say. All right, so let's get off the screen share. Back to the challenge. Minty rye, the rye bread crust. Rye bread is, I like rye bread. I can't really say I ever eat it, though, unless I eat a Reuben sandwich once every 10 years on a trip somewhere. Like, I just don't eat it regularly, but I'm not opposed to it, and I do like it. Yeah, very, very minimal in the nose and nothing remarkable, just standard, like the most standard thing you ever wanted to smell. Same story here. A little bit, maybe a little bit more bread crust, but appearance wise, they're fine. Clear honey color, like I said, amber gold, whatever. Aroma, basic. Anything offensive, anything off, strange, weird, unusual? No, nope, nope. Just basic. If you want to say bland or dull, I wouldn't take issue with that description, although I'm trying to frame it in a better way, you know, make it sound nice. A lot of times it's how you frame things. Okay. Or how you present it, basically. All right, taste, cheers. Funny, sometimes these rye whiskeys have like a vanilla character. You said just like bourbon. Yeah. Does that come from the oak? I guess so. I guess it does, but I can't say for sure. There's a vanilla quality, a sugar cream. To me, whiskey is very sugary. Like, I find whiskey is a sweet drink. If you think it's dry, go ahead and think it, and that's fine. But my perception of it, it tastes like sugar water to me. Whiskey tastes like sugar water. Okay. This is very, very mild. Very, very mild. 80 proof, that's as low as you can go. If you go below 80, you couldn't call it whiskey. You could go below 80 and you could sell it, but you would have to call it something else. You couldn't call it whiskey. You could call it rye based liquor product or something like that, but then who's going to buy it? So, like, yeah, they don't go below 80. When I was in Africa last year, I was saying, man, I can't believe they got this scotch for $4.99, you know, for a full bottle of scotch. I was saying, yeah, it's so cheap. But then I started looking at the bottles carefully, and I was like, okay. It was like 60 proof. And then I was reading it careful. I was reading it in Spanish, but you could kind of understand, you know, I can understand Spanish a little bit better when I'm reading it, like French. And it was sort of like saying a Scotch style product. And I was like, oh yeah, people that got no money and they want booze, you know, they'll buy it, you know, even though it's like 60 proof with like 30% alcohol. And they had some rums like that, rum style liquor product. So you got to be up to 80 proof in America to. Now if you go to Mexico, they can get away with 35% alcohol, 70 proof, and call it rum or brandy, but in America that's not going to be allowed. Australia too, they get like Jim Beam at 38 proof, 38%. 38%. Now, you know, that's like a tragedy. Yeah, a little bit more flavor here. A little bit. Honey, maybe some honey. But they both have mentholated qualities. Like menthol, you know, like, oh, you know, like a menthol cigar, one of these things. It's got the same feeling of mints, you know, like spearmint. I guess it's spearmint. something like that. Yeah, I like it. I like rye whiskey. I prefer rye whiskey over bourbon, honestly. Do I like bourbon? I like bourbon, but it's sometimes a little bit too much like drinking grits. Like I like to eat grits, eat grits with like sausage in it or hog's head cheese or real cheese or butter, just grits with salt and butter. But after a while, like all that corn, just like, oh man, do I really want more corn chips? And then you drink the bourbon and it's like corn chips. I don't know. It's like too much of the same thing that you eat during the day. Uh, Rye seems a little bit more non-standard because, like I told you, I don't eat rye bread every day. I told you about once every 10 years. So now if I ate rye bread on the reg, as they say on the streets, oh me, I can't help that. That's a gift. But then I might be turned against it to an extent. The body on both of these is medium, almost you could say low medium. They have a light quality to them. And the finish is mostly dry. So they have a sweet flavor now, but the finish is dry. That helps it out. Wesley Estheimer says, are there any menthol flavored beers, or is it just more of a flavor used in liquor? Well, remember, they're not adding menthol to these. It's just that the rye gives it a mentholated type flavor. The rye itself, that grain, that type of grain has that. But they do have they have peppermint vodka, peppermint schnapps, which is similar to vodka. They have peppermint, spearmint, and those type of things. Now, years ago, there was a Colt, I think it was Colt 45, and it was a menthol version, like trying to make it taste like Cool's cigarettes or a Newport, something like that. That didn't last. Maybe it lasted a year. I've seen pictures of the bottle and can, but I don't know. Maybe it didn't taste right. They couldn't get the flavor correct, or people just didn't like it. But it was something like that. It was like, I think it was called Colt 45 Cool, COOL. So isn't that something? And of course, we know they use that in gum, chewing gum, and bubble gum, mostly chewing gum. Okay, got it. You're welcome. I love. Oh, Crap Beer Tastic says, not I love. I know rye in beer adds a nice little spice note. Like those rye IPAs. Sometimes in beer, though, it can be a bit of a turnoff. You ever notice it's kind of like a weird tanginess that's not so great. But anyway, let's see if I can figure this out before the news starts here. Red crust. Hey, I'm not going to call a winner if I can't figure them out. I'll call it a tie. If I cannot tell them apart, I'm not going to play games and then just get it right on a guess because it's a 50-50 shot, which is good odds. So I'm not going to do that. But we'll see right now. This has a little bit more like character to it, a little bit more flavor, spiciness, but it's not much. It's minimal. So really, without even telling them apart, I can tell you Old Overholt wins because it's $12 cheaper. So it wins. What's better, Old Overholt or Templeton Rye? Well, it's about the same. But I like to keep $12. You know what I'm saying? I'm not paying $12 for the same thing. So Old Overholt wins automatically. There's no appreciable difference. So some people would look down on this. They'll say, oh, that's cheap. I'd never try that. I'd never try. Well, you never tried it, so you don't really know. But then if you got an attitude about it, when you try it, you're going to, psychosomatically hate it, which is why you should do blind taste tests. You don't let the people know what it is because, some people are so label conscious. They'll just be like fanatics about it. But try it without knowing it, and you'd be talking about, oh, this is a really good rye. I love the complex qualities and the interaction of the rye and the other grain. Yeah, right. Well, then you show them old Overholt. Oh, I knew something was wrong with it. No, you didn't know something was wrong with it. You said that after I showed you the label. If you'd have thought it was Basil Hayden rye, you'd have been bragging on it. Okay. I'm not saying that's for everybody, but some people are like that. You know, they're peculiar that way. Okay. So I think this is old Overholt, but my confidence level is 0 on that. And it is actually the Templeton. So I couldn't tell them apart. I got it wrong first error in this challenge, but I figured it could happen. And secondly, they're so similar. So that's it. Yeah, they add flavoring, I guess, but it's flavoring to make it taste like rye whiskey. So it still has the character, aroma, and flavor generally associated with rye whiskey. All right, now, so I'll try to do better with the next old Overholt tomorrow, the new red cap from 2020. See y'all then. Bye-bye. Take care. Have a good Saturday.